Hello there, Johannes Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. And today I'm going to be tasting a Canadian whiskey that we covered during my talk about Canadian whiskey with author Davin de Kergamo, who he has written extensively about Canadian whiskey over the years. We didn't jump into individual distilleries and kind of talk through their individual histories. So why not sort of do that now? I don't have a lot of information on J.P. Weiser. I have to say that I am still learning about Canadian whiskey, so I'm getting little bits along the way, and I will impart to you whatever I can about these. But J.P. Weiser is actually John Philip Weiser, who in 1825 was born in the U.S., and then he decided to migrate to and immigrate into Canada. And when he went there, he had a relative that owned the Charles Payne distillery in Ontario. And so he started working there, and within 5 years he bought the place, and this is the birth of J.P. Weiser. And so it became a very big distillery. And around the time of just before World War I, J.P. Weiser passed away, and so the distillery went in flux there for a little while, changed from owner to owner, until another American origin founders company, Hiram Walker, came in and bought them out and held on to them until ultimately Pernod Ricard now owns the brand, along with Jameson and Avalauer and a variety of other brands on top of that. So anyway, that kind of gives you a little bit of background about the distillery and the company. And like I say, hopefully someday I get up there and we'll have an opportunity to divulge a little bit more information about it, or have somebody on from J.P. Weiser to talk about their history, which would be great. This is a signature series exclusive, so this one's going to be hard for you to find. If you find a J.P. Weiser that is a 4-grain whiskey, that is what this is. Now, they have basically distilled a corn whiskey, a rye whiskey, a wheat whiskey, and a, what did I miss? Corn, rye, wheat, and barley, so a single malt, basically. And then as they aged those separately, they blended them together to make a Canadian blend. So very interesting. They did this one to try to really enhance and make it rye forward. So we're going to see how they did in terms of doing that. This is 43.3 proof. This is batch A.A1681. It is J.P. Weiser. Let's go ahead and do a tasting, nosing and tasting on this. Have you had Canadian whiskeys that you have just fallen in love with? Write them below. I'm still looking around to see what I can find, and finding them is the real challenge. Very light on the nose. The rye does come through a bit. It's interesting that they wanted to do a rye profile, but they also use wheat, because a lot of times the combination of rye and wheat is to actually kind of punch down the rye a bit and make it smoother, as they say. Very light on the nose. Okay, so I got a little grain note in there, and kind of a malty note along with that rye, and maybe a wee bit of toffee, but just a little. Cheers. Grain note comes through, toffee, rye. Again, rye is out front, definitely. Not a ton of oak influence on this. It is, kind of goes to a milky toffee at the end. Not bad, like a little touch of rye and Werther's Original there on the finish. Light, it's not overly milky. I don't want to oversell that. And then kind of a dusty rye is left on the palate after that. It's a nice sensation at the end, actually, if you are a fan of whiskeys that dry out and you like a grain note, because that grain note is still hanging around. So it's a nice little blend of, and it's not overly sweet. For all those people that think that, all Canadian whiskeys taste like maple and they're all sweet, this one doesn't go that way. This is definitely more on the dry side once it gets to the finish. And it's not overly complex, but it definitely is a nice drinker. And again, it's a chance to taste a Canadian rye that isn't sweet, but is much more on the herbally side and brings some interest out there. That grain note just it's interesting. It's right on the tip of my tongue, and it's like, hello, I'm still here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and again, leave your comments below, and if there's a Canadian whiskey you've had that you'd like to let me know about, do so. And have you had J.P. Weiser? Is there a J.P. Weiser that I should be on the lookout for? And if the folks at J.P. Weiser are watching, I'd love to interview somebody from there at some point in the future. Until next time, cheers and Slainte. I really need to find a Pinot Ricard rep because they have a lot of brands that I'm very interested in. Cheers.